Welcome to 50 Plus in Montgomery County, a monthly program that is a voice for many, produced by the Commission on Aging, of which I am a community member. This show is insightful for people of all ages, and each episode takes a fresh look at important issues by spotlighting older adults in the community, representatives of services and programs, and activities of interest to older adults. My name is Katie. On this month's show, we're going to talk about elder abuse. Today's guests are Mario Warzalson and Robert Hill. Mario is the Senior Administrator for Assessment, APS, and Care Management Services at the Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services. Robert is the Chief of Special Prosecutions Division in the Grand Jury Unit and Legislative Affairs for Montgomery County, Maryland. Welcome, Mario and Robert. How are you?
Thank you, Katie.
Well, tell us about elder abuse. What is it?
Sure. Katie, elder abuse is the intentional or neglectful acts by a trusted individual, caregiver, family member of someone who's vulnerable and is unable to take care of their day-to-day needs, such as showering, preparing meals, getting dressed, paying bills, things of that nature. So elder abuse occurs when there's a caregiver not doing their job, they're neglecting, they're leaving someone alone that might have dementia, they might wander, perhaps they won't eat under those circumstances. We call that self-neglect in Adult Protective Services. So that's one of the areas we actually assess and investigate.
Mario, how often does it occur?
Well, national statistics are approximately 1 in 10 older adults experience some type of abuse annually.
And Robert, where do you come in here?
My side of it is financial exploitation, and we found that seniors are particularly vulnerable to exploitation, whether it's a family member, whether it's a caregiver, a banker, or all of the above. But we specialize in the prosecution of persons that exploit seniors financially.
And how do your two entities work together?
Well, there's definitely an overlap.
Okay.
Often we will get a referral from Adult Protective Services where there's been a complaint for neglect or whatever it might be. But there's also they discover along the lines that there's a financial component to it, that somebody's stealing from them, and so we'll work together with respect to that sort of situation.
Okay.
It's a great partnership. So Montgomery County has an elder abuse vulnerable adult task force. So Robert's a part of that with the state attorney's office, law enforcement, Adult Protective Services, ombudsman program with the Area Agency on Aging, and emergency medical services, fire rescue service. And we come together monthly or as needed to collaborate, strategize, work together, working on cases, but also at times doing legislative initiatives and things of that nature. So we really believe in that collaboration.
That's really good. So you have a lot of resource partners in the county together.
Yes.
Absolutely,
Okay.
sure.
What are some of the red flags that people should be aware of?
Okay, so in addition to neglect, which I talked a little bit about earlier, Adult Protective Services will investigate financial exploitation. That's actually the second most occurring thing that we take a look at. And self-neglect is actually another area that we will go in, do an assessment, create a safety plan. Our goal is to try to help folks stay in the community in the least restrictive environment whenever possible with the right supports and resources. And then there is, of course, physical and sexual abuse, which we will investigate as well.
What are some of the examples of the financial abuse or some stories that you've encountered?
Well, there are scams, and one of the ones that's come to really been highlighted recently has been gold bar scams. And I'm just giving an example of a case that we're working on right now. Is a person was on their computer, and there was a pop-up, and on the pop-up they clicked on it. Don't ever do that.
Okay.
They clicked on it, and they got a message that they needed to contact Mike Rogers with the Justice Department, and because all of their accounts had been compromised. And so unfortunately the person called Mike Rogers. It wasn't Mike Rogers, it was some guy in a call center in New Delhi, India. But that victim thought this was a Department of Justice attorney. And that attorney instructed her to empty her bank accounts and to go buy gold. And what would happen is once the gold is purchased, contact me. We will send an agent, an FBI agent, to a grocery store near their apartment. And you meet in the parking lot and turn over the gold. And there's a code. The code will be like the word orange or red or something like that. And you just tell the driver the code, and then everything's okay. So they take the gold bars and they disappear forever.
Wow.
And we've had some victims who have lost over $1 million.
Wow.
So
That's a lot.
It's a serious, but never click, never give people information about yourself. Stay away from those things. Call a family member and say, look, I just got this, if you have any doubt.
Okay. With that in mind, who do you think is most at risk? Because a lot of us receive pop-ups, and sometimes we do, unfortunately, we click on those pop-ups. Maybe we're familiar with the brand or the source, but who's most at risk
So
here?
the Federal Trade Commission reported in 2023 that it was over $165 billion nationally defrauded or stolen. And seniors was in the 60 to 60 billion plus category. So it affects people of all ages, but what they have found is that older adults are more likely to lose more money, whereas I think the younger adults catch on quicker and maybe are more familiar with some of the, especially the stuff online, some of the tactics occurring.
Okay.
So education is really important to know, as Robert was saying, don't hit the links, don't hit the clicks.
Right.
Go to the source directly. If someone's talking about you owe taxes, go to irs.gov, make a phone call. Don't just hit that link.
Okay. How can, so you said older adults are more at risk. How can family members, caregivers, your neighbors be helpful in the prevention of this?
Sure. So some of those red flags for financial exploitation in particular is if an individual is no longer paying their bills like they normally did, they don't have the money. And so as a family member or a landlord, that could be a red flag, like where is the money going? So Adult Protective Services, law enforcement, and state attorney's office are places to receive those types of referrals, and we receive them by law from fiduciary institutions, family members, banks, credit unions, and so forth. And the financial institutions, if they suspect the change in spending patterns, money being moved around different accounts, new account holder names being assigned that they're not familiar with, those are red flags.
Okay.
So we do get a lot of reports from financial institutions.
Okay. Mario, let's put a pause on that. I want to go back to it, but you mentioned the legal aspect, so I would like to ask Robert, what are the laws in place in Montgomery County or even the state of Maryland that protect us?
Well, there's certainly, with respect to physical abuse, sexual abuse, there are, neglect of an elder neglect, and there's first degree, second degree. There are assault charges. There are charges related to sex offenses. But in my department, we have theft, and theft is broken down into 4 different categories, the highest of which is theft over $100,000. There's financial exploitation of vulnerable adults, which is particularly key to what we're talking about today. And it also is tiered so that you have financial exploitation of vulnerable adult over $100,000. There are identity fraud statutes and counterfeiting. Someone signs your check. That applies. So we have a lot of tools in the tool chest related to financial crimes.
Are there any improvements that you would like to see in the law, particularly as it relates to maybe guidelines and timelines?
Yes. The Maryland Sentencing Guidelines Commission sets forth, and I believe every year they send out new guidelines. And the guidelines are determined in part by sort of what's happening legislatively with statutes and so forth. My concern is that the guidelines are too low for these types of offenses. And I understand, it's not lost on the state, that nonviolent offenses, nonviolent offenders don't always necessarily, should not necessarily be incarcerated. However, in a situation where somebody comes in and steals the life savings of an 80-year-old man, and he's destitute because of that, I think the guidelines should be higher. And guidelines are not mandatory, but they give guidance to judges.
Okay.
But if you start at a higher point, I'll just give you one example. Theft over $100,000, which could be theft of $5 million from somebody, guidelines for someone who has no prior convictions are only probation to 1 year. And so I think that needs to be addressed. Yeah.
That's very low, and considering you could really mess up someone's entire life, especially an older adult, if they're living off of that $100,000 to $5 million for the rest of their life.
And in effect, it is violence.
It's incredible.
It is violence, yeah.
It's violence, and it also has a physical impact. Research shows that if you've lost a good part of your life savings, it's devastating, and folks get sick, some die. You have a 3 times higher likelihood of dying earlier because of financial exploitation.
Yeah. How much of this do you think goes unreported? I'm thinking if I'm an older adult and I was, susceptible to a scam, maybe I'm embarrassed to even tell somebody that I fell for this because I did click on the pop-up. How often does it go
So
unreported?
New York State did a study back in 2011 on how many times a report comes through, and it was 1 in 44 cases reports of financial exploitation were reported during that survey. It's 1 in 23 for all other types of maltreatment, the physical abuse, neglect, self-neglect. And a big reason for that, it's the embarrassment and shame. And so we don't want to blame the victim, we want to empower that victim.
Okay. Are there any, so I want to come back, Mario, the types of abuse. We've talked a lot about the theft, the financial abuse, and the physical abuse. Is there any other types of violations that we should be aware of?
Well, self-neglect is actually the thing that we work the most with. Over 50% of our cases are on self-neglect. And that occurs when an individual's had, let's say, a stroke, dementia, early Alzheimer's disease, cardiovascular issues, and they're no longer able to attend to those, what we call activities of daily living, showering, even brushing your teeth, preparing a meal, getting to the doctor, making sure your meds are taken properly, things like that. So when those types of issues occur, we have clinical social workers that go out and do these investigations and assessments. We have a couple of nurses as well, invaluable. So we'll put together a whole plan, a holistic plan. We're going to take a look at their living environment. How can we adjust accessibility issues, grab bars, handheld showers, putting in the right personal care supports, things of that nature.
Where does guardianship come in here?
So guardianship would be it's always our last alternative because it's a very restrictive intervention. We're always looking for the least restrictive. However, if a person has poor cognition, they're not able to make decisions regarding their finances, and if they're also being scammed and they don't realize that and they're losing their money, those are red flags that might bring us to the table of guardianship, and that's when we're going to make a call to Robert and outline what we have seen, our capacity, mental status or capacity assessments, and in the state of Maryland, to actually pursue a guardianship of either property or persons for medical decision making. You need 2 certificates of capacity, one from a physician, the other can be from another physician or a clinical social worker, psychologist, et cetera. So we would go there if there's no family that we can tie in that's going to be supportive, and we need an outside party to actually manage either the finances and or their medical decision making.
Okay. At the top of our conversation, we talked about resource partners. You mentioned, law enforcement and the task force that you're a part of, both of you are a part of. Can you just talk a little bit more in detail about those partners?
Sure. So the law enforcement's a terrific partner. We just had a case in the past week where someone was reported as a missing person. A family member had taken them from a nursing home facility, at least it was reported that way. The police were contacted a day later with a missing persons report, as was Adult Protective Services. So I was able to call our elder abuse unit, which is unique and for many other Police departments, they don't always have elder abuse units, so we were able to make a contact, and both the acting supervisor as well as the lieutenant were able to contact a detective that had worked with this family in the past, and because of that, we had a relationship. We were able to actually find that gentleman who was just simply moved from one place to another. It was safe, but we didn't know that going into the situation. So just that partnership with law enforcement for Adult Protective Services was terrific.
I can add, the Montgomery County Police Fraud Section is a partner to us, and
Okay.
they are, like I said, we get some cases from Adult Protective Services. We also get cases from the Fraud Section. But the Fraud Section did a terrific job in breaking the cases against these gold bar offenders, and there are 5 so far that they have 5 cases they've broken and we've prosecuted. So we rely on them a great deal in terms of their investigators and so forth. They're very capable. We have 3 investigators in our in-house in the Special Prosecutions Division. They're all very experienced. And so we also work with the Special Victims Unit at the Montgomery County State's Attorney's Office, and that's where the overlap comes. They're looking at neglect and abuse and assaultive behavior, and we're looking at exploitation and financial exploitation, and we meet on a weekly basis to compare notes, and we collaborate on cases.
I was going to ask about that. How quickly does cases get to you?
It depends. It depends. I mean, if we receive a complaint, if somebody walks in the door, a citizen can come in. Our chief investigator will immediately review the materials they have, and sometimes with financial cases, it requires us to subpoena bank records, personnel records, and a variety of things before we're ready to go with it, and that can take a while. But I think the quickest we've had a turnaround is maybe within about 30 to 60 days in terms of getting a case up and charging. But that assumed that we had the documents that we needed.
Wow.
Okay.
So you get your cases from a variety of places, seems like, and as well as your partners. What about a hotline, though, for community members? If they notice something, I'm a neighbor, I see something a little bit unusual, who do they call?
So for Montgomery County, we suggest that you call our Aging and Disability Resource Unit number, which is 240-777-3000.
Okay.
240-777-3000. There's also a state hotline, too, so
Okay.
they're welcome to call that. It's a 1-800 number,
Okay.
1-800-91-PREVENT.
Okay. 1-800-91-PREVENT. Now, June is known as WEAD, so can you talk a little bit about World Elder Abuse Awareness Day?
Sure. But you mentioned that. So I'm the chair with co-chair Dr. Kimberly Johnson, who's the director of our area agency on aging. But we serve the Elder Abuse Vulnerable Adult Task Force, because it's really it's that task force that puts this together.
Okay.
So we're going to do that on Tuesday, June the 17th at the Holiday Park Senior Center. We're going to simulcast on Zoom as well. So we'll have some staff at a couple of the other 7 senior centers throughout the county. But it's available to anyone, and we encourage folks to participate. We're going to have all of our partners there, myself and Robert.
Okay.
Robert's our keynote, actually. So
Lucky me.
That'll be a great keynote.
But anyway, it's a really good morning. We have some fun too. We'll have some music and resource tables from our various partners, including like Fire and Rescue and others, to present to our older adults and whomever in the community is interested.
I'm definitely interested, and I will sign up using that QR code.
All right.
Probably, though, I'm going to definitely take advantage of the hybrid model and do it virtually.
Sure, it's all good.
Is there anything else that we haven't covered as it relates to prevention or policy and legislation that we haven't talked about just yet?
Right. So I also want to mention the Surgeon General did a report back in 2023 on the dangers of isolation and loneliness and lack of social connectivity. So the WEAD event is kind of a cool thing, because we're actually partnered with the Department of Recreation and the Senior Center programs, And senior centers and other civic programs, faith communities and so forth, they're a wonderful hub for folks to get out, socialize, hear about different things like scams, just to be aware, plus not to mention the physical activities and various other activities. So isolation is really one of the red flags, one of the big red flags for APS. And so we want to encourage folks to get out, and family members to our neighbors to look in on their older neighbors and so forth to help them out if they need it.
Yeah, loneliness and social isolation is really big in older adult communities, so that's very interesting.
Yeah. So the Surgeon General actually said that you have a much higher risk for cardiovascular disease, depression, anxiety, other issues, and Dr. Vivek said that Murty said that it's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. It's very negative impact. So I didn't realize that. So it was an excellent report.
Yeah. If I could add to what Mario was saying, is I think that persons who are isolated are more susceptible to scams, like what I just talked about with the gold bar scams, because sometimes they're lonely. It's a person to talk to.
Right.
And they're con persons, con men and con women, who will ingratiate themselves, and the next thing you know, the victim is doing everything they tell them to do.
Wow, that's just amazing. But I definitely believe that. So, Robert, anything else you want to say to us about, again, policy and legislation, or just from your expertise, what we should know?
I would just tell I would tell members of the community who have either family members or neighbors or friends, and to keep your eye out. How's your neighbor doing? But also make sure, if you see something on the news about gold bar scams or any kind of news scam, go tell your neighbor, go tell the friend, because the only way that we're reactive often as prosecutors, but we try to be proactive, and by educating, and that's what it's all about, is educating the community. Like this show, for example, I think this is an important thing.
Thank you.
Get the word out.
Wow. Robert, okay, you just prompted another question for Mario. Education's a huge piece. How often are you out in communities educating just regular folks who maybe have no idea about this topic?
All the time.
Okay.
So, we keep track of that. We do hundreds of, we present to hundreds, if not thousands, of folks throughout the county, but we're also invited to go in other parts of the country because of the multidisciplinary approach that we take is a little unique. And so that's a very important piece of it. And so I do also want to say, since you were talking about, to me, it's like, if you see something, say something. The police also talk about that. That's why that 240-777-3000 number is important. And you don't need to know conclusively if there's neglect going on or abuse or whatever, or exploitation. But if you suspect something, something's amiss with that neighbor, family member, give us a call, give us the details. We need to know who that person is, where do they live, what's your concern, and then we can screen that and make a decision if it merits for Adult Protective Services to do a face-to-face assessment.
I'm curious, if I made that phone call because I was concerned about my neighbor, then what would happen? Would someone follow up with me? Will I just know any additional details about that?
Well, we'll certainly let the reporting source know that we've taken the report and that we've, who's going to be working with that individual. But we have to also be very respectful of confidentiality, and of course, reporting sources are anonymous to the client.
Okay.
We don't disclose that.
Okay, that's fair. All right. Seriously, this time, final thoughts.
I appreciate the time and the opportunity to talk to the community.
Okay.
And we hope everybody shows up for World Elder Abuse Awareness Day.
June 17th, 10 o'clock, Holiday Park, or on Zoom.
Well, that concludes our program for today. As you can see, the voices of those 50 plus matter every day and in every way. To learn more about services for seniors in Montgomery County, please visit the Montgomery County Seniors website by visiting montgomerycountymd.gov/senior or call the Senior Resource Line at 240-777-3000. Before we wrap, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge Pride Month. As many people know, June is nationally recognized as a time to commemorate the LGBTQ+ community's history, celebrate their achievements, and advocate for equality. It marks the anniversary of the Stonewall riots and also serves as a reminder of the progress made and the ongoing need for inclusive spaces and protections. And with the theme of inclusion in mind, June has a lot of other key themes. It also includes Men's Health Month, Alzheimer's and Brain Awareness Month, National Great Outdoors Month, National Caribbean American Month, Filipino Heritage Month, National Immigrant Heritage Month, and Juneteenth. With all that, we hope that you'll take the time to be mindful of the various celebrations, awareness campaigns, and heritage recognition. As always, thank you for watching 50 Plus in Montgomery County.